Hi, gang. Thank you so much for listening to my daily poll podcast. Really appreciate that. And thank you as well for watching the Daily Poll podcast on YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, we yesterday dropped Mingle episode number 9. It is a conversation that I've just had that I think is really worthy with Professor Eva Meyerson Milgram, Professor Emerita from Stanford. And the way she got on my radar screen was to publish a piece in the Los Angeles Times under the headline, "You Need More Friends Who Aren't Like You." And I read that story, and she talks about having been traveling and being in a language immersion program in Nice and getting along very, very well with someone very dissimilar to her. And in one of their final encounters, they talk politics. And all of a sudden, Professor Meyerson Milgram realizes that the person she's befriended is very sympathetic to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And now she's got a dilemma, as in, what do I do? Do I unfriend this person? And so she works through that in a way that I found reminiscent of a lot of the conversations that I've had with radio listeners who say, hey, Thanksgiving table or Christmas upcoming, I've got a friend or I've got a relative and we don't see eye to eye relative to President Trump. So how am I supposed to handle that situation? Her argument is one of, you need to have more friends who aren't like you. And it gets very interesting because she first tells the story in our conversation about the encounter with the person with whom she disagrees about Putin. But then when she gives specific examples of the need for mingling, she says, get out of that book club. Don't think that by being in book club, which, strikes a chord with me, with people who are very similar to you, don't think that you're doing a sufficient level of mingling. So please watch it. It's posted. It's hot. It's in today's newsletter. Mingle episode number 9 is out there and ready for your viewing. Okay? Thank you for that. Here's your Wednesday poll question at Smerconish.com. Should the U.S. follow Australia and ban anyone under 16 from having a social media account? And my answer is hell yeah. And I know I'm going to be in the majority on this, but I'm really interested to see just how many people disagree. And when we take calls on this later today, on what basis do they disagree? I don't know. Mingling is having a moment. Mingling is having a moment. I have to tell you, and I'm heightened to, paying attention to social media stories and stories about socialization and common experience and so forth. And when I see something of interest, there's a purple box that we put around it in the newsletter. I've got a great purple box story in today's newsletter that I'll talk about on radio. But people, and I'm not saying it's because of the Mingle Project, please don't misunderstand, but mingling is having a moment. There is an awareness. People are realizing we really do need to reconnect as a society, and social media has been an impediment. Thank you to my friends at Play Gun Lake, Detroit Pro Football and Basketball, the college football playoffs, and so much more. What a story about Indiana in today's newsletter and the level of practice. I don't want to give it all away, but speaking of football, you'll want to read that story too. There's always another way to win at Play Gun Lake and Sportsbook app. Live bet while you watch all the action. Bet more than the score. Bet player performance tonight, touchdowns, rushing, passing yards, and more. It's the only app that I recommend to the great state of Michigan. My team at Play Gun Lake Online Sportsbook and Casino, they've got great holiday season offerings. Download the app, open an account, get a $50 casino bonus on the new slot game everybody is talking about. It's called Huff and Lots of Puff. Plus, get up to $1,000 casino bonus back if you're down in the first 24 hours. Join me now. Make your downtime fun time by going to Play Gun Lake, online casino and sportsbook app, playgunlake.com. They've got the details. Got to be 21 and located in Michigan. Gambling problem, 1-800-GAMBLER. Yesterday, 30,528 votes were cast on this question. Would legalizing heroin and cocaine effectively reduce fentanyl-related deaths and improve global stability? 70% and change said no. 30% said yes. That's a conversation that arose out of an interaction that I had with a buddy of mine doing the CNN show on Saturday, talking about the drug interdiction, the second boat tap the whole issue we've spent so much time talking about. And this friend of mine said the war on drugs has been a colossal failure, and we ought to legalize drugs. That's the way that we need to approach this. And I thought, that's a good poll conversation. And it was a great discussion yesterday. And yesterday on air, I read from an essay published by Kofi Annan, the former UN Secretary General. He's gone now. He passed 2 years later. But, Kofi Annan writing for Der Spiegel on why it's time to legalize drugs. In my experience, good public policy is best shaped by the dispassionate analysis of what in practice has worked or not. Policy based on common assumptions and popular sentiments can become a recipe for mistaken prescriptions and misguided interventions. And our drug policy is something that puts in that category. So, with regard to today's poll question, should the U.S. follow Australia and ban anyone under 16 from having a social media account? I went with the coverage today from the Sydney Morning Herald. So you will see that as the second or third story at Smerconish.com. But it's a huge story here in the United States. New York Times reporting from Sydney. Hundreds of thousands of teenagers in Australia awoke Wednesday to find their social media accounts logged out or deactivated under a new law that bars anyone younger than 16 from the services. The day marked the launch of a sweeping governmental effort to shelter children from the potential harms associated with such platforms, putting the country at the vanguard of regulating social media services that parents and educators worry have ensnared a generation of young people. Good for the Aussies. And how embarrassing that they beat us to the punch, because we haven't done a damn thing. There's a patchwork of states that have done some things, but on a federal level, they haven't done anything. They haven't done anything, and neither party has tried to own this, although someone is emerging and trying to advance this issue, which I think is a great thing. Let me just play some audio because I love the accent. This is Prime Minister Albanese in Australia.
Make the most of the school holidays coming up, rather than spending it scrolling on your phone. Start a new sport, learn a new instrument, or read that book that has been sitting there on your shelf for some time. And importantly, spend quality time with your friends and your family.
Amen, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. I love that. Now, closer to home, Ambassador, former mayor, congressman, chief of staff to President Obama, Rahm Emanuel. Rahm Emanuel will be on today's radio program. And he did an interview with Politico, an exclusive interview with Politico yesterday. Rahm Emanuel says U.S. should follow Australia's youth social media ban. He's mulling a presidential run, pushing for the United States to follow Australia's lead in banning children under 16 from most social media. He released a video yesterday on social media. Let's watch and listen.
Today, Australia is banning all TikTok, Instagram, and all social media from kids that are 16 and younger. I think it's time for America to pick up its game and do the same. Look, when it comes to our adolescents, it's either going to be adults or the algorithms. One of them is going to raise the kids. And I think we need to help parents. It's too much for a parent to push against Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the other Snapchat, all the other social medias apps. Our kids are way too vulnerable. It's too addictive, too alluring, that a parent should face off against these powerful companies that are trying to influence their children. Now, when it came to taking telephones out of classrooms, we've seen progress. When it came to restricting tobacco from our kids, we've seen progress. When it came to the designated driver, we've seen progress in protecting the safety and the development of our children. So today I'm calling for the United States to follow suit, come up with its own plan, but protect our children, help our parents, strengthen our families, and restrict all the social media when it comes to access to kids and adolescents 16 and younger.
I like it. I like everything that I just heard from him. I'm going to try and convert him on today's radio program to the larger message of mingling. And I think I'll have some success, but you'll want to tune in and be a part of that. So the 10 social media platforms and apps that are banned in Australia for those under 16, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, X, YouTube, Reddit, Twitch, Kick, and Threads. As a result of the ban, NBC is saying that more than 1 million social media accounts held by users under 16 are being deactivated. The social media companies will be responsible for enforcing the ban and will have to pay fines of up to 49.5 million Australian dollars for serious and repeated breaches. Age verification is up to each platform to decide, although the one requirement from the government is that requesting ID cannot be the only form of an age check. And this is overwhelmingly popular in Australia and in the United States. A YouGov poll last year found that 77% of respondents were in favor of the ban, with those backing the effort saying that it'll encourage children to prioritize in-person interactions and boost their social skills. There was also a national study the Australian government commissioned this year, which was released in early November, showed that 96% of children aged 10 to 15 use social media. I mean, that's the issue. It's like 100% within the margin of error. And what Australia has done is that they've made it easier for parents now because you don't want your child to be the outlier. That's why we've discussed this in the past. A community approach is what's necessary at a minimum, because if certain of the parents, remove social media from their kids, but the rest don't, then their kids by definition are the outliers. Look, I brought in studio with me today the Bible on this issue. Jean Twangy's book, iGen. She was ahead of the curve. This book for me was an epiphany moment. And she's been a guest of mine any number of times on radio and on television. And I remember when the book came out. Let me just see, first edition here, 2017. Okay, the book first came out in 2017, and when Dr. Twangy published this book, and I remember her coming on the program, she would only speak in terms of correlation, because she was very cautious. Here's what I'm seeing in the data, but she didn't want to close the causation loop. Now she's beyond that. And I just, my copy's all like thumbed and tabbed and everything, because this is the copy that I first read when I first read the book, and then she came on as a guest. But I want to just read to you something from the very beginning of the book and then something from the end. She writes, I've been researching generational differences for nearly 25 years, starting when I was a 22-year-old PhD student in personality psychology at the University of Michigan. Back then, I focused on how my own Generation X, differed from the boomers. More gender equality, more anxiety, among other things. As time went on, I found a broad array of generational differences in behaviors, attitudes, and personality traits that distinguish the millennials, the generation born in the 1980s and early 1990s. That research culminated in my 2006 book, Generation Me, updated in 2014, a look at how the millennials differed from their predecessors. Most of the generational differences that define Gen X and millennials came along gradually, building to a crescendo only after a decade or two of steady change. But around 2012, I started seeing large, abrupt shifts in teens' behaviors and emotional states. All of a sudden, the line graphs looked like steep mountains. Rapid drop-offs erased the gains of decades in just a few years, and after years of gradual inclines or hollows, sheer cliffs suddenly brought traits to all-time highs. In all of my analysis of generational data, some of it reaching back to the 1930s, I'd never seen anything like it. So 2012 for her was the tipping point. And what does she realize? That's the year that, for the first time, a majority of us had a smartphone. That's the year that Facebook acquired Instagram. That was the beginning of the selfie era. And that's what heads her down this path of studying the relationship of emotional health in our adolescence and technology. At the end of the book, toward the end of the book, based on research presented here and plenty more, it's best to put off giving your child a cell phone as long as possible. There's really no reason for an elementary school child to have his own cell phone, so that's an easy one. By middle school, with kids in more activities and more likely to ride a bus, not anymore, you know that data, Many parents buy phones for their kids for convenience and safety. However, that phone doesn't necessarily need to be a smartphone to compete with internet access, to complete with internet access and the ability to text. Instead, you can buy your child a phone with limited functions. How about an old flip phone, also known as a dumb phone, without internet access or a touch screen, which means that texting involves hitting the same key several times to get different letters. Remember that? When my friend's son headed off to our local middle school recently, she bought him a flip phone. I plan to do the same in a few years when my oldest will be riding the bus to middle school. That was Dr. Twanging, way ahead of the curve. So, bottom line, absolutely, we should be doing what the Australians are doing. Follow the lead of Down Under, I say. Go vote on today's poll question at Smerconish.com. It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. I just want to see how many people are going to oppose it. I mean, truly, I'll be disappointed if it's not like 90-10. This is a poll question. This is unique for me, where I'm actually rooting for a 90-10. I want 90% of us to say, yes, follow the lead of Australia. Thank you for listening to the Poll Podcast. Please watch on my YouTube channel, and I invite you now to check out episode number 9 of the Mingle Project. See ya. And it looked really good.